Hello. Today let's talk about the urinary system, specifically talking about the kidneys. So right now we're looking at an overview of the urinary system, and we can see that we have two bean-shaped pair kidneys, and then coming out of each one is a ureter. That ureter carries urine down here to the bladder, where it's able to exit out the urethra. And if you're a female, notice that you have a uterus sitting directly on top of your bladder, and then think about when a woman is pregnant and why she has to pee all the time. Also worth noting that the kidneys have adrenal glands sitting on top of them. They release adrenaline. And then we can see major arteries coming off into them. So renal artery in red, renal vein in blue. You can remember the functions of the urinary system by thinking about what a wastewater treatment plant does. It basically takes everything bad out of the water. It's going to get rid of waste products, and that's what the urinary system is going to do. Get rid of waste products. It's going to balance ions to be able to maintain the correct pH. Really important for staying alive. This picture shows us where the kidneys are located. So notice that this is if we have been cut in half. This white line right here is the perineum. So this whole area right here is the peritoneal cavity. That would be like where the intestines and the stomach and the liver and all that stuff is located. The kidneys are located outside of that. So we call them retroperitoneal, because they're outside of the peritoneal cavity, located honestly right next to our vertebra, really close back there. All of this yellow stuff surrounding them is fat that holds our kidneys in place. When you hear stories about starving children, something that they're at risk for is that their fat actually diminishes, and then there's nothing to hold their kidneys in place, and they drop lower down their backs. Not good. Let's take a look at this diagram. So we can see that the kidneys are located, this diagram, that the kidneys are located kind of behind the rib cage, so they're getting a little bit of protection from the bottom of the rib cage. I also notice that the right kidney is lower than the left kidney. If you remember, we have the liver sitting in our right upper quadrant, so it kind of squishes the kidney and pushes it down a little bit. And the kidneys are about the size of a large bar of soap. There is a kidney, but I'm going to go back one, or I guess I'm going to go forward one, because I thought I had yeah, there it is. There's a blank screen so that we can kind of draw a kidney together. So I'm going to start off by trying to draw something that's roughly bean-shaped. And the outside of the kidney is called the fibrous capsule. It's made of connective tissue. It holds everything together. And then let's get maybe some, well, I'll save yellow for the urine. Sitting on top of the kidney, where I'm kind of running out of room up here, is the adrenal gland. Secretes adrenaline, increases our heart rate and our blood pressure, activates the sympathetic nervous system. And then let's get a nice yellow pea color, and let's draw a ureter coming out of the kidney. So this kidney is going to filter blood, and the product of that is urine, like all of the bad stuff that it ends up taking out of the blood that we call urine. So it's going to come down the ureter, make it to the bladder, and then we pee it out the urethra and into the toilet. And there is a whole kind of intersection right in here. Let's draw you a little bit higher so we take up a little bit more space. This is called the renal pelvis. It's basically like a bowl, and it collects the urine, and then the urine is able to travel out this way down the ureter. Coming off of each pelvis, I'm going to erase this now, possibly, so that I can draw that a little bit differently. Coming off of each pelvis, it branches into little kind of tubes that are called calyces. And that is where, like, they collect the urine, and then they're going to dump it into the pelvis. Let's draw one where it actually branches a little bit right there. So I will relabel this pelvis, and this tube right here is a calyx. Calyx. We have minor and major calyces. So this one right here, that's only one tube, would be called a minor calyx because it only has one tube. This right here is a major calyx because notice that it branches more. So we have multiple branches coming off, qualifies it as major. All right, next let's add in renal pyramids. So we can kind of do our best to draw a somewhat triangular shape, and that is a renal pyramid. Pyramid. And there's a renal pyramid that sits on the end of every single calyx. The renal pyramid is like pretty much where the urine is actually made, so it makes sense that we have them very close to the thing that's going to collect the urine. Right, renal pyramids. I'm gonna now switch over to a highlighter, and I'm gonna try to shade in the rest of this outer space, like this stuff in here that's not the renal pyramids and it's not the calyx. All of this is like extra tissue in the kidney. Sometimes we call that cortical tissue. It could be located anywhere, and what that means is it's not really participating in the function of the surrounding organ. It's just taking up space, and like to give it structure, it's a good thing. And it also could store like carbohydrates or things that might be needed at some point in time. So everything on here that's not a pyramid or a calyx or the pelvis, we're going to call cortical tissue. Okay. There's a name for the cortical tissue in between each pyramid, and it's called a column. It's not a real structure. It just means, like, that's why I'm kind of trying to do like a dotted line. Like this right here would be a renal column. And then again, like this space right here would be a renal column. So would this space, so would this space. So it's not a literal structure, it's just what we call the space in between the pyramids. And then finally, let's label some regions. So this spot from here, like where the renal pyramids end to the fibrous capsule, all of that space in between, that is called the renal cortex. Cortex means like the outermost layer. Then if we come up here, if we take a look at the space from the pyramids down here to the pelvis, down here to the pelvis, all of that space in here is called the renal medulla. Medulla means middle, so middle section of the kidney. And then the very center we already labeled is called the pelvis. Now let's compare what we just drew back to this actual diagram so we can try to figure out what's going on. Here is the ureter where the pee comes out, and that means that this whole area right in here is going to be the renal pelvis. These are the little calyces right here. And let's see. Oh, I just kind of covered up something I wanted to show you. This one right here that I just erased, this would be considered a major calyx because it branches. We have 1, 2, 3 branches, so he gets to be a major calyx. And then you can see the renal pyramids. They really do have like a pyramid shape. They're made of a whole bunch of lines. I'm gonna trace around here and then trace around the outside. That is the renal medulla. So the middle part that contains the renal columns and the renal pyramids. And then we have our outermost layer between here and here. That is our renal cortex. There's a little bit of fat on the inside that I didn't draw. We also could have added on the renal artery and the renal vein. The kidneys get like 25% of the heart's blood supply. They get a massive amount of blood, and that makes sense because they need to be able to filter the blood. And tomorrow we'll move on to nephron and try to figure out where the little filtering units are within the kidney. Thank you.